Okay, uh, this video is to cover two things, looking at what float means and looking at where we put our plugin files. I've opened up my green apple and you can see the marching ants around it. That means that this apple is floating. Now, what if it weren't? To unfloat it, I can go to select none, and you'll see the marching ants went away. If you look over here, you see my layers. I'm going to shut off the eye to the layers here, and you see that it leaves the outlines, and I'm going to shut off that one, which took away the copyright and the outline, so I'm left with nothing but the apple. Now if I go to my magic wand and I click anywhere here, this is the area that's floating. This big area here, the apple in the middle, is not floating. The area that is floating, you can do things in that area. For instance, if I take my airbrush, I have color red and black. The left click gives me my red, and this is the only area I can work in. I can try to go down to the apple, but as you see, it will not interfere with that. Now if I do my right mouse button, there's my black. Once again, I can go right across what's not floating and it does nothing to it. So I'm going to undo to get back there. Alright, so we're back. Now you see you can work in an area that's floating. You cannot work in an area that's not floating. What if I wanted to work on the apple? I would go up here under selections and I would do invert. Now you see the apple is floating. Now I can do all I want out here. I hold it down, try to draw a line, nothing. The only place I can do anything is right here in this area. I can take my red, and as you see, it won't go outside the lines. This is very, very, very helpful when we have an area we want to work in and we are concerned about what will happen if, if I put a blur on it. Perhaps you're aware when you soften something or you add a blur, let's see, it causes the pixels to spread. Now I'm going to make a layer above this layer over here, a new raster layer. Actually, I'm going to cancel that and I'm going to back up to green. I'm going to make a new raster layer. Okay, so now I have a new raster above my green apple, and I'm going to label it red apple. Okay, remember I can only color in this area now. I'm going to cut this off, but I'm still left with the floating area. So let's just do a little red in the middle. Remember I said blur causes things to spread out? Let's put it right up next to the line here. Okay, right up to the line there. Now, let's do a little black in here, or white in here. Okay, now, adjust, blur, Gaussian blur. It's set at 10 right now. Do you see how the pixels spread there? But they didn't go outside the line. They spread, but they did not go outside the line. When you're using a Gaussian blur, you tend to want to do different levels depending on, radius 5 does not give you the blur that radius 10 did. If I made it 20, see, it makes it even more diffuse. But the key, and the reason we're looking at this now, is because of the floating feature. Floating keeps all of your pixels contained in a certain area. Okay? Now let's just do one more thing here. we'll do a new image, 500 by 500, and we're going to do some text here. I'm going to set it for, I'm just going to write my name. I'll set it for 100. When you're doing text, you have two options up here. Or you have several options. You can make your text centered, left align, right align. I like to do centered. That's up to you. The direction here, you can cause your letters to go from, just a horizontal, or you can make them up and down. Vertical and right, vertical and left. When you're doing a vector, you want the anti-alias sharp, not off. Create as. Here's where that word, floating. Create as floating. Okay? So I've got it size 100. Let's write my name. V-I-K-K-I. Alright. Now you see the red on the outside. That's because I have stroke width 1. If I highlight it, I could change this to stroke width 2, and you see that the red is getting larger. All right, but we're looking at floating now, right? This is what you wanted to know about floating. Okay, so we'll leave it there, and we'll do the checkbox, and you see, there we go. We've got the little marching ants. The only area that you can do anything with this floating like this, we'll go back to the paintbrush. We can't do anything out here, as you see. You can only do something in the floating area. I don't know why I've got my... Oh, I've got it rotated. Okay. Rotation 0. Let's make it 0. Alright, there we go. Change the size. Once again, it won't do anything out here, but as you go over the area that's floating, it will do something with it. There again, if I wanted to adjust and do a blur, a Gaussian blur, at 20, you see it covers up the whole thing. What if it were 1? It's just a little bit of a blur. If it's 2, a little bit more. And by the way, you can do 1.5. There's a lot you can do with blur. But this, we wanted to show you about floating. Now say I like that, but I want to do something with the background. Selections, invert. Now you can only draw something or do something with the background. So let me do a new raster layer. I like to do things on new layers. It makes it a lot easier to me. Say I want some blue, so let's put a little blue here instead of the red. And I'll make this a little bigger. And I'm going to just do some blue around my name. Alright? Alright, see, that's above the name, but because this is floating, nothing is going to touch it. I'd have to do selections, invert, again, to make the Vicky part float, and we don't want to do that. So I can do a lot here. Adjust, blur, Gaussian blur. Now look, see, now my name's showing up a little different in there. You can, okay, blur. Alright, how about if I just want it around the edges, but I really want it solid in here? I can go back and make it solid, more solid, and leave it fuzzy around the edges. There's a lot you can do, and I hope this helps explain float. That's what it means when you float something. You can work inside the area that's floating. Selection, invert. Now Vicky's floating. Say I want to experiment and I don't want to really screw up that in case I like it. I can make my raster layer. Okay? Now let's pick another color. Let's do a yellow. And Change the size to 4, which is kind of small, make it a little bit bigger. Remember, I'm on a new raster layer, and I'm back inside the name now. Whoop, look at that, see? It's putting some orange on it because it's only going to go in the area that's floating. And it's also on a different layer, so if I don't like it, all I have to do is shut off that layer. Adjust, blur, Gaussian blur. 10's a little much, can't really tell it's there. But now you can see the little bit of orange merging in. So it's up to you to decide various things, but you're just here to understand float. Okay, remember, if I don't like it, I can just cut off the eye and it's all gone. If I don't like the blue background, I can just cut off the eye and it's all gone. So are you clear now? The name Vicky is floating. If I want to do anything out here, selections, invert. Now I can do something out here, because this has been separated from it. That's a name. Selections, select none. We'll do one more raster layer. Okay. And we'll go back to the text tool. The difference between floating and vector. Vector is sharper. You can expand a vector a great deal without it compromising the quality. Okay, when I do click, now I've got it in a box, and if you look over here it says vector 1. Okay, this can be moved. I'm going to shut this one off. Okay, they're all shut off but this one now. Okay, so there's Vicky on a vector. I can take this and blow it up this big. Vectors are nice. You see that the lines are still very crisp and clear. Floating images, raster images, cannot be blown up without diminishing the lines. The lines would not be as crisp and sharp. However, say I want to float this now, okay? I can go to Selections, select all, Selections, invert, nothing happened. You know why nothing happened? Because I'm on a vector layer. If I go to my magic wand and click here, what is floating? Do you know what's floating? This out here is floating, not the name, because see the lines around the edges. I would have to do selection, invert to get this to float, and it's still on a vector layer. Now if I want to color it, add some color in and get a paintbrush here and want to start painting something, oh, what happened? Let's see. The promoted section is not floating. You can't do any coloring with this on the vector layer here. So if I go up to the promoted section and do this again, selection, invert to where I just have this, and then go back to the paintbrush, I'm on a raster layer, and as you see, it only touches what is inside that which is floating. There is a great deal that you can do with this. I didn't put this on another layer, so we have all this kind of working together. In my mind, it's always better to put something on a different layer. Putting it on a different layer is more forgiving than not putting it on a different layer. Adjust, blur, Gaussian blur. Look at that. You can do an awful lot when you have something floating. And the more layers you use, you know, it's just a lot you can do with it. So I hope that this explains floating, what it means to float. Selections, invert, takes it back to where all you can draw in is here and nothing touches the name because I inverted the selection. Undo, selection, invert, we're back on the name. Nothing comes out here, just on the area that's floating. Okay. Save. No, we've got it recorded. We don't need to save. This one I don't want to save because I've got it doing something else. Nope. Gonna leave it. Now, let's open my Apple back up because it's right there. Plugins. Effects, plugins. As you can see, I have a lot of plugins. Plugin 1's, you know, go down here. Let's keep going. Look at this. Plugin 2. My goodness, how many plugins does one girl need? Mirrormeister. I like Mirrormeister because seamless because it's got this one thing called Emboss at Alpha that I really like the effects that it gives. But I'm only showing you this to show you a little bit about where your plugins are. And you can see I have 3 pages or 3 tabs of plugins. Each one has plugins, different kinds. No idea what most of them do. But let's go back here and look at File, Preferences, File Locations. Okay. This, as you know, is where you put your files for PSP to find. Plugins. Look at there. We've got all kinds of things for me in plugins. Paint Shop Pro has some. I'm asking it to find everything that I have, and I'm going to show you what I do with my plugins. Okay, so we're just going to X out of that, minimize this, open up Documents is where I keep it. If you look down Documents here, my PSP files is located in my Documents, and it should be located in yours too. Anything new you get should be put in these files. Notice the difference between preset shapes and presets. They are different and can be very confusing. You notice I don't have any plugins in the my PSP files. What I have is plugins, plugins 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Plugins, there you go. I put my zipped files in here. When I right click, I can open them. Extract here is what I generally choose. If I hit extract here, it will tell me that this is already here. Do I want to replace it? Cancel. I don't want to replace it. It's working just fine. But it will create the folder for you. Mura Pro. The only thing in there is the 8BF file. PSP uses 8BF. That's the only thing that Paint Shop Pro works with, is 8BF. Let's go back to Documents and where it says Loose. I have some 8BF files loose in here. They're not in folders. Water Ripples 8BF. But I have it set up in PSP to where it will look in PSP4 loose and inside the folders. There's all my little 8BF files. So my suggestion is make plug-in folders. I have 6 folders because I didn't want so many in one. I don't know why. It doesn't really probably matter if all of them were in the same folder, especially since I didn't even bother to do anything in alphabetical order or anything else. Documents. There you go. Alright, I'll have to find out if there is more you need to know. If you have a problem, and I would suggest that you copy and cut and paste wherever you've got your PSP folders and start over so that you know where you are and what you're doing. There is a program that converts like AFS to 8BF. It works really well. It does take a little to get used to it, but it works pretty fast. If necessary, we can look at how to do that. It's I get it from Harry's plugin site. It's called Plugin Commander Lite. Will convert different types of plugin files to 8BF so that you can use them. I get Pico Lite. I thought I already had it installed. Maybe I haven't since I redid this one. But the Pico Lite is free. You can do a lot more with the paid version, but I've never needed it for anything but just a straight the straight ability to convert, batch convert. There we go. Select folder where your plugins are located, otherwise press cancel. I'm not going to select. But you see here it's got file view, plugin view. You don't need that anyway. If you had plugins, you can look for plugins in a certain place, and anyway the convert comes up here where it will convert it and move it over here, and it will fix it for you. But I'm not going to get into that anymore right now, but 8BF is what you need. And that concludes my overly long video for floating and plugins.